I've really enjoyed listening. I love the stories. I'm not born and raised Harlem. I'm actually a transplant. I'm the child of a military family. My dad is a retired Air Force colonel. My mom, educator and a director of contracting. And me and my sister grew up actually traveling from the age of 3. Wow. I spent half my childhood abroad in Germany, Italy, Japan, throughout the States. And that background actually, from a very young age, the world of possibilities were limitless for me, right? But one of the things I noticed wherever we lived, and my parents, at least earlier in my dad's career, because he was an intelligence officer, so secret, all of that career, but we were able to live in the communities. And so my mom, I have these memories of wherever we lived, she would always shop the marketplaces. If we were in Italy, we would go to the open market to get the bread and the cheese and the this and the that, and wherever we lived. And I used to always notice that wherever we were, it's like the shopkeepers, they were like the center of the community, right? When you were out in the business owners, the people that owned the stores, they were the anchors in the community. That's where all the action was. And as a young child, I used to think, I'm gonna own a business one day. I knew from the age, very, very young, people would ask me, what are you gonna be when you grow up? I said, I'm gonna own a business, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur. Didn't know really what I was saying, but I knew I wanted to be one. But one of the things I noticed was that I didn't see Black store owners, right? And it wasn't until, and it's the funniest story, I remember, I think I was it had to be about 6, whatever year the Jeffersons came on TV. And I remember George Jefferson.
Dry cleaners.
He was from Harlem. I didn't even really know what that meant then. Who knew that at the age I was going to end up in Harlem? But he was a Black store owner. He owned a dry cleaner, but it was a store. And right then and there, I was like, that's what it is. I'm going to have a retail store. And from that age, that's what I would tell her. I'm going to be like George Jefferson. I'm going to have my own retail store. So from a very young age, I said I knew that businesses in the community were the anchors. That's where the people gathered. And one day I wanted to be a part of that. So as my career, traveling around the world, eventually, going to school for economics, business, all of that stuff, when I came out, the first job that I had out of business school, I was working for a shopping center developer.
Wow.
Shopping centers all around the country and Canada. And it's funny you mentioned Harriet Tubman, because once I got the lay of the land, I started to see, wait a minute, not many Black folks in these high-end shopping centers. So I started on the low trying to find businesses that were Black owned and working with them to try to get them, because they couldn't get, I would ask, why don't, I would see a store out in a commercial district, why don't you want to be in the shopping center? They don't let us in. They don't give us the space. It's always, so I started finding businesses that I knew on paper, everything, top notch, all the things, whatever, bring it in, get the deal done. It wasn't till the end when they would figure out it was a Black owned business. So word started getting around, there's a woman in DC at this company that she's getting us in the shopping centers. They started calling me Harriet Tubman, the Underground Railroad. That's why when you said that, the word started getting around. There's a woman in DC, if you want to get in such and such shopping center, call Nikoa. And I would have to work with some folks to get their stuff right, because there's a learning curve. But that's what people the word started to get around, so much so that a woman named Deborah White, who at the time was the CEO of the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone here on 125th Street, she was trying to get a couple Black-owned businesses that were in Philadelphia and DC to come open. It was right when the Empowerment Zone, remember Manhattan, we had the largest Empowerment Zone, remember, 300 million. And so all this money to revitalize Harlem. Now, mind you, let me go back, the developer that I worked for, again, this is God working, when I first started coming out of B school, they recruited me. First day on the job, they gave me a book. Pick anything you want in the Nikoa to decorate your office. Painters, whatever. I was like, oh, I'm big time now. For whatever reason, the one picture that I saw that I liked was a picture by Jacob Lawrence, the Harlem processional, right? And I just was like, I don't know what it was, it spoke to me. So on my wall in DC, in the office I was working in, running new business development, I had this picture that was Harlem inspired on my wall. Again, no connection to Harlem, not knowing what that was gonna mean. So I got George Jefferson when I'm little from Harlem, then I got this picture. So now fast forward, I get this call from Deborah Wright. I'm trying to get these businesses to come to Harlem, and your name just keeps coming up as the woman in DC who's getting these folks in stores. When are you in New York next so we can have lunch? I need you to come to Harlem. Now, mind you, I was like, I'm good. I got an expense account. I'm in DC. I'm traveling. Like, I'm in New York. I'll have lunch, but I'm not going anywhere. One lunch with her, when she gave me the vision for Harlem and everything that was happening, military kid in me left that lunch, went home. Now, mind you, I moved every 2 to 3 years of my life, so I know how to pack up and move and relocate. Went home. It was in December of 1998, first week of December. By the next week, I put my house on the market. Luckily, a Chinese family had just moved and they were looking to rent. They gave me a certified check for a year's rent up front.
Oh, wow.
I literally packed up my stuff. By the third week, I was in New York. I was starting work right here on 125th Street by the first week of January 1999. That's how I got to Harlem. And I was so excited because Harlem was just something that I read about, the nostalgia. But my family's from the South. My mom's from Savannah. My dad's from Atlanta. All these stories about civil rights legacies. My mother's brother, my uncle Benjamin Van Clark, very active in the civil rights movement, very revered. He was a team leader. And so if you Google him, in Savannah, Georgia, there are neighborhoods named after him. There's parks named after him. There's a museum installation of him. Benjamin Van Clark worked very closely with the movement. Dr. King, my mother was one of the people getting bitten by the German Shepherds and with fire hoses. I grew up hearing about that. So I grew up in a house with a mother who was in the civil rights movement, 13 jailed, and a father in the Air Force, all about protect the liberty, protect the homeland. When you grow up in a house where you got that, you ain't got no choice but to stand up, speak for the voiceless, represent, even if you got all the pedigree. They sent us to the schools because my sister also went to Stanford. She got her master's from Columbia. But my mother used to always tell us, because my mother was from Savannah and she grew up dirt poor, like no shoes poor. And she used to always, and she and my father met, she ran away from home to go to Morris Brown College. That's where they met. They got married their junior year of college. But she used to always say, there before the grace, because there was a woman that was her godmother that helped her get to school. She would say, you guys need to remember whatever privilege you have, make sure you are giving it back to the community, because there before the grace, the people that are the voiceless, that are marginalized, all the things, they're the ones, that was me. So you never turn your nose, you never snub, you do the work, whatever these degrees, I need y'all to put it to work. So both me and my sister grew up ingrained with that thought. You can get all the experience you want, but you better bring it back home. I didn't know home was gonna be Harlem, but it ended up being Harlem. And funny enough, Harlem is a mix of my whole life. It's very Southern, but it's international. All of the combination of experiences I had growing up. So when I got here, I thought I was gonna only be here 2 to 3 years, get the military itch and move. And that was 25 years ago. And when I got here, I just the first deals I worked on, the first deal I did was the restoration of Lenox Lounge. I got the pleasure of being thrown right into the history of Harlem. So that was my first deal with the Empowerment Zone. And then Wells Restaurant, working with Wells, that was my second one. And then I was working, so it was suddenly I'm living history. Wow. And then from there, I became an entrepreneur. I opened my own store. I had a store here for several years. I've co-owned a restaurant for several years. And then I created an organization, Harlem Park to Park, to help the businesses here and become a support system for them. And grew that to 300 businesses and ran that for 14 years. But there's always been a thread through what I've done, even when I was at the developer, which is what can I do to advance our community and Black-owned businesses? Because the reality is, without that, to build generational wealth, the ownership is key, right? You either need to own the land or you need to own the businesses. Going back to the businesses is where that you preserve our culture, you ensure that multi-generational wealth through ownership. So I've been really committed to building, as you mentioned, infrastructure for small businesses, and that's been done through when Whole Foods, as soon as I read that Whole Foods put in the New York Times, that they were opening in Harlem, I started harassing their corporate office about, if you come to Harlem, you have to partner with me, because you can't come to 125th, open up this big store, put these businesses out of business, raise the rent, and you don't open with some of our businesses on the shelves. So they were open to the idea. Initially, they started sponsoring the Harlem Harvest Festival, which a lot of people know me for that as well. And we realized with all these vendors, great product, when that store opens, how do we make sure those brands are on that shelf? So I said, you need to create a program with me. We're gonna mentor them for the next 2 to 3 years, so that when the store opens, eventually open in 2017, you know what, you're not gonna put them on the shelf and then they fail and you can say, well, we tried. We're gonna teach them, because maybe they don't know, but let's teach them. So we created the Harlem Local Vendor Program for that purpose, so we could mentor and work with the global director of Whole Foods to help those brands. So if you all know Vi Higginson, Mama Foundation, Mama's One Sauce, that's my heart. That's her product, the sauce. She and I met. She wasn't even thinking about being in a store. We met. She told me about us. I said, let's get it in the bottle, get it packaged up. I'm gonna get you on those shelves. So there are several small businesses. When you shop Whole Foods, we opened that store with 20 Harlem-based brands. Most of them are still in there, and most of them, Vi is selling. She's in 52 Whole Foods stores throughout the Northeast region now. And several of the businesses like that I opened in that store are in that position. And I say all that to say, I realized Harlem was gonna be my home, because the purpose, it clicked for me. All this growing up around the world, all this going to school, all this corporate, was for me to come here, which is where, for our community, this is the Black Mecca, right? You create the model here, you create the model for everywhere, right? And so, just like you, doing the service, and it's not always, listen, I got classmates that are making a ton of money, they're running big corporations, all the things. I'm not making that money because I decided I wanted to focus on community development. But the currency that I have, the social capital, there are people that will literally tell me, Nikoa, I started bringing my daughter to the Harlem Harvest Festival when she was 3, and now she's this age. Or Nikoa, I just opened another store in such and such state. Or Nikoa, as a result of what you did with, like, there are so many people that I've had an impact on. It doesn't translate into dollars, right? But it's building an economic base. So the Harlem Cultural Festival, when I saw that film, Summer of Soul, and first of all, Musa Jackson, I've known for 25 years. He's one of the first people I met in New York. But when I saw the film, I called, I said to myself, man, imagine the impact if that festival hadn't been lost for 50 years, that footage in somebody's basement. Where would Harlem be today? And that festival, if you think about festivals, Essence Festival in New Orleans, or the Jazz Festival, all the economic driver, I said, we gotta figure out how to bring it back. And one day I was sitting on my laptop in my restaurant actually, and I said, let me just do a trademark search on Harlem Culture Festival. And I saw a name, and I was like, who's Greg Fawcett? I don't know that name, Greg Fawcett. So I called Musa. I said, Musa, are you working on bringing the festival back with someone named Greg Fawcett? He said, I don't know who that is. Made some calls, did some digging. He came from the community, somebody that worked years ago as a celebrity rank, basically a white guy that saw the film and realized it's time to cash in on. So he had just filed the trademark the week before I happened to see the search. I said, Musa, we can't let this happen. We cannot let someone from outside the community come in and essentially appropriate and commercialize this festival, because it's not gonna be for us. That's right. So he and I started putting a plan together to bring it back. And look, I've never produced anything on this scale, but somehow we're gonna figure it out. And ultimately, that's where it started. And we, started the process in 2022. And the first run of it, got a lot of fanfare and et cetera. Some hiccups, we've had to regroup, but now we are coming back full force now with it, so it's gonna come back in 2025, and we're gonna be celebrating the 55th anniversary of it this year. Awesome. And so we're ready to kind of start outreach, which when I saw you were with the councilman's office, I just sent an email to his office to get on a calendar to talk to him about it, as well as all our other elected officials. But for me, the fact that after all these years, I have the honor of being a co-founder of something like the Harlem Cultural Festival, which is such an iconic and intrinsic part of the Harlem history. And as someone who Harlem became my home, it's such a privilege, and it's a way for me to give back to Harlem in the way that Harlem has given to me. I now have roots. I grew up as someone, when you move every 2 to 3 years, you don't have roots. Your family is your roots. And so now I have roots. I have people who know me. The question that people would always ask me online, where are you from? Where are you from? I would have to take a deep breath. I'm born here, went to school here, live here. Like, I never could answer the question like people that are born and raised somewhere and you've known someone for decades. And I didn't have that history. But now I've been here. This is my history, right? And my daughter's being raised here. So for me, the give back and what I'm doing is all my love letter to Harlem. Thank you for giving me this home and embracing me. And so you're gonna be hearing a lot about the Harlem Cultural Festival. You specifically gonna get a call from me because we try to get on that calendar. But things like this are so important because, again, being recognized, a lot of people don't know who it is behind something. Like, people came out for the Black Lives Matter mural, right? That was a big deal. People don't know that was me. It wasn't about that. It was about galvanizing the community to do it. A lot of the things that people hear, they talk about, I'll hear people talking about something I produced, and they don't know it's me. So it's not about the recognition, but it's always nice when you are recognized. And so things like this, for Melissa, who was, Pawnee Bistro, Cisse, they've been members of Harlem Park to Park for years. I've worked with Melissa for years. So when she told me she had nominated me for this, I was really touched because, she's like, Nikoa, as much as you've done for all of the businesses, et cetera. And I said, I appreciate that because it's a labor of love. There's nothing else I'd rather be doing. But it is nice when people take a moment to say, thank you. And so this for me is that. I really, really appreciate it. And you know how it is. We take 5 minutes to pat ourselves and then you get back to work, right? So that's what it is.